today. Many folks here, if you've been like us in the last couple of years, you've been seeing your E3 friends and colleagues and lots of your other friends and colleagues by Zoom. So it's fun to be back again in 3D, so welcome. We're excited that you've chosen to spend some time with us today. My name is Dr. Camber Balch. I am Assistant Vice President for Academic Success at Texas State University, and I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves today because we have two institutions of higher education here today that are engaged in similar work, but doing quite different things in the way that you do it. And so we're excited to talk about some of the work that we are doing to seek those students out who might not be engaged. So we already have a theme that resonates with our keynote this morning. So with that, I'm going to turn it over first to my colleagues from Concordia University, Texas. Please introduce yourselves.
My name is Dr. Casey Poshbushel, and I am the Vice President of Academic Operations. I'm very happy to be here today.
My name is Cindy Melendez, and I'm the Vice President of Student Services at Concordia. And I'll pass it back over to Texas State.
And I'm Dr. Victoria Black. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Student Success at Texas State. And now that you know who we are, we really want to take an activity to get to know who you all are and who's actually sitting in the audience with us. So we have a brief Mentimeter here. So we'd like you to bring out your phones and take the QR code. And I'll give you all a second to do that before we go into the questions. And I think you give a thumbs up, kind of lets us know that you're in the room.
Do we need to turn it down?
There you go.
Move that.
Solving already.
Iterative.
I can't see.
Everybody be careful.
Now we know why you're coming early.
It's already broken. It's broken before this.
It's also meant to be an interactive presentation, standing up, getting up a little bit.
If you have your laptop open, you can probably get on there as well. This kind of tells us how many people are in the room. So we've got 32 officially. Got it? Oh no, it's not working? Okay, you might be able to get on with the code on the website a little bit later. So we want to know what area you are currently representing right now. Districts, CDOs, it's like, who's going to win?
It's the horses are on.
Okay, it looks like the two-year institutions of higher education is most represented in the room too. And next. Okay, good. Awesome. Okay, next question. What is one key takeaway you hope to get from this session? Okay, these are all great ideas. I love this surprise me.
Yeah.
Coming in here with no expectations. I think one of the things that resonates with me really is the improving our response to student engagement, because of the pandemic, student engagement looks very different. And this is one of the ways that it's a low-level engagement opportunity where students don't feel like they have to raise their hand and talk in the classroom. So I love being able to use this to kind of meet them where they're at based on the learning that they have. So we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for participating in that.
All right, so just to kind of reset the stage here and where we are all located in the Central Texas landscape for the most part. All this data is available on the E3 Alliance website, and for the most part, I think we've all engaged with this data set in some capacity, but I wanted to point out a few key themes. It definitely informed our work at Concordia, and I think it has informed our partnership for a while as well. These are not new, they're certainly surprising in some ways, but some of the key data points that I wanted to point out were that for the first time in decades, this year, we have less than half of our Texas high school graduates enrolling in post-secondary institution, right? That can mean all sorts of things. As our keynote speaker talked about, there are post-secondary opportunities. It doesn't necessarily mean post-secondary education, but that's just something that we need to wrestle through, right? Are they seeking post-secondary opportunities? And if they're not going into higher ed, where are they going, right? So as we are probably seeing is that our pool of post-secondary students straight from high school is diminishing, and how do we respond to that in our setting? Also, over 90% of the undergraduate students in Central Texas attend ACC, which I think we have ACC, okay, there we go. UT and Texas State, okay, so our students are staying here. They're staying in Central Texas, and they are choosing one of those three students. I think we are like number 4, number 5, but they're choosing us, right, and they're staying home. What are we doing in our area here to make sure that they're supported and engaged? And then the post-secondary completion rate in Central Texas is 56%. That's taken a little bit of a dip in the last few years. That means that we're talking about the end result, right? It's from the beginning to the end, the A to Z pipeline. What are we doing to make sure that we are supporting them throughout that, right? And I know we have a lot of higher ed practitioners in this room, and so we know the daily work that takes place in order to do that, and we hope that with this presentation we can provide you with some more insights on that. But just want to make sure we set the stage with this data.
So we wanted to tell a little bit about ourselves. I really enjoyed doing this presentation with Texas State because we're very different schools. We're small. We were founded in 1926. We're a private faith-based university. We have about 2,000 students. 34% of our total enrollment of our students identify as Hispanic. We are in North Austin off of 620 on this beautiful acreage that is part of the protected wildlife reserve. And so it will never be developed. And so we're right on the edge of Austin. What I love to tell new families is you get the excitement of the big city without all the problems of the big city. And so it makes students feel safe on campus and makes families feel safe. We recently are a recipient of a Title V grant that we call Con Corazon. And we're a small university, but we have a lot of students that come to us that we want to make sure make it all the way through.
Fun fact, Con Corazon, which is with heart in Spanish, translates into Concordia in Latin. So,
Okay, so Texas State University, again, is a vastly different institution. We were founded in 1899 as a teaching college. Does anyone guess how many times we've changed our name? Six times. It has changed 6 times since 1899. We are a Hispanic serving institution, and we've been that way since 2011. And so the demographics since then have drastically changed as well. We were excited to reach that mark in 2011, but looking at who we're serving now, it's vastly different as well. We are an emerging R1 institution. Right now we're focused on 2 pillars. One is our run to R1, to become another state institution that is in R1 status, as well as our student success initiatives that we're focused on getting to 85% retention by 2025. so I still take my breath away when I say that. We have, and that number is closer to 39,000 as of this fall semester, and 43% of our students identify as being first in their family to attend college. We are considered a majority minority institution, and we've been that way for several years now as well. And if you, fun fact, here's our fun fact. We are home to the only school in Texas that has a U.S. president that graduated from that institution, who also signed our 1965 Higher Education Act in our what is now music building.
Well, but right before we move on, the other thing that I wanted to point out is we have some higher education professionals in the room, two-year, four-year, but we also have some school districts and the community-based organizations, and what I'd love for you to take away from this is how you work with your K-12 students, especially how you talk about what college is going to look like. One of the things that I usually get on my soapbox about when I'm talking to this audience is I hear so many students come to college and say, well, my high school counselor, my high school teacher say, professors aren't going to care about me when I get into college, that I have to figure this out on my own. And there is a transition from K-12 to higher ed in the student accountability, but it is not because professors don't care. It is about shifting that responsibility and having your parents helping you or having a different mindset or look at how it works from the student being a bigger self-advocate. But in order for us to develop that self-advocacy, there is a lot of caring that happens from our professors. And this success check is going to show that.
And can we set the stage with one more thing? What's your incoming first-year class size roughly?
This year is 235 of our
Okay.
first-time freshmen.
So for those in the room who are thinking, okay, how is this going to apply to me? Our first-year class this time is 7,919 versus, so if you're thinking, what can I take away from here? What we hope by partnering together is that you're going to take something away that's going to apply to your situation. And so hold us to that. Whenever we talk about something, if you think, well, wait a minute, I'm not sure I could apply this in my particular setting, raise your hand at some point or ask us questions at the end, because we have learned a lot and we've iterated a lot, and that's what we wanted to share with you. So we will try to give you our knowledge and how it might apply to your situation too.
So when we're looking in the literature as to why early alerts actually matter, there's a lot of evidence-based practices that demonstrate that as we look early at identifying which students are trending towards academic failure, the more we can provide intervention to get them right back on track, right? And early alerts is not a new thing, but how we provide those interventions and connect them with resources, services, or really create that sense of belonging. That was such a huge takeaway early this morning, is that these students want to feel like they matter. And Casey's right in saying that faculty and staff at these institutions, regardless of what size of institution, really do want them to be successful. It's no longer the look to the right, look to the left, one of you or two of you are not going to be here mentality anymore. It's more like look to your right and look to your left and make sure you both all get there, right?
The other thing that we do want to point out, there are lots of points of data that you could think about as your early alert in that context, and so the word holistic will come up a lot for us, because what we're trying to do is really respond to that student in that moment, who they are and what their needs are. And so one of the things I saw in the takeaways, like what do you want to take away, how do you get people to buy in, how do you get faculty to buy in, those sorts of things. There are lots of potential levers that you can use, and one of them that we'll talk about is sharing data and research with your faculty. But as we go along, think about your students and what their needs might be, and then even if what we're talking about doesn't necessarily apply to that, think about whether you could substitute that thing that you look at for one of the things that we have looked at in our early alerts. Sure. So to get started, one of the things that we share in common with both of our institutions is that we are trying to make use of technology to make the job easier. So I'm curious, by show of hands, how many of you who might be engaged in this work or you're thinking about being engaged in this work How many of you think you already have a technology tool that could be applicable to this? Anybody have a technology tool that they think they could be applicable? Okay, so you'll see that there are packaged things that you can do, but you'll also see that that doesn't necessarily matter. The good old-fashioned spreadsheet and getting some people to fill out a simple form on a website could go a long way. So for us, one of the things that we want to give you in terms of technology, we at Texas State feel like we struggle a little bit with technology. We don't always feel like we have the technology that we need to meet our scale. We've grown very, very quickly at our institution, and so what that means sometimes is when you have rapid growth, you don't necessarily always have everything keeping up with that in terms of your infrastructure and your resources. So what we did, our first year seminar is called US 1100 at Texas State. It's a 1-hour course that every first-time in college student is required to take as part of their degree plan. When I arrived at Texas State, I took a look and the program reported to me. So thinking about one of the other things that we heard today, control the things that are within your sphere of influence. I was like, okay, I've got this captive audience, which, is, everybody knows that too. They all want to put everything into your university seminar course. But I thought, okay, I have this captive audience. What can I do with this captive audience in addition to the content that we're already delivering? So in my previous role at Texas Tech University, we were a banner school and we used something called midterm grading. And that had not been something that had been turned on at Texas State at the time. So I could see it in the system. I was like, okay, let's see what we can do here. And so I just set up a meeting with the registrar and said, hi, can I use this? And he happened to have come from a school that had had early grading. And so he said, sure. So it was a very simple outreach to flip the switch. So they flipped the switch and we started asking all of our university seminar faculty to turn in a midterm grade, but we deliberately changed the name in Banner to initial academic feedback because midterm implies you're already halfway through the semester. And the point of what we wanted to do is bring it to early alert and get everybody into a mindset that we wanted folks to do something very early. So we turned this on and we've been using it pretty much as the sole user on the Texas State campus for 4 or 5 years, And then some other folks started, I started talking about it, we started kind of mentioning it. Folks who were from other campuses had used Early Alert before. So we had some good traction with that, but if you think about it, it was just one data point. So it was not enough to really give us all the information that we needed, even though it was helpful. So it was that early grade, and we did manage to put it into practice at the time I probably had 250 sections of University Seminar. Now I have close to 300 sections of University Seminar. So alone that's useful, but from a scalability perspective, the way that you're really going to make an impact is if you can get as many users as possible doing it at the same time. And so we were able then to show some of the data that we had put together. This is how we're outreaching, this is the kind of result that we're getting. And then in the last year, our provost has said that all general education courses, core curriculum courses, faculty should turn in that grade. We'd had some other willing participants, willing partners along the way, like our developmental education courses had been interested in doing it. So we started by building a coalition, using a tool, controlling what we could, asking, building a coalition of the willing, showing some data and some results, and then getting some traction. So that's kind of the history of our technology implementation. And right now, that is the tool that we are using.
So we've been in Early Alerts for quite a bit now, but our current iteration and the purpose of this conversation is what we like to call success checks. And so we just changed the name on how we name it on our campus. And it's really because Early Alerts were already being taken care of by another entity on campus. And that was our behavior intervention team. And so most campuses, K through 12, higher ed, have some sort of behavioral intervention team. On our campus, we lovingly call it BIST. And what we noticed is that instead of, well, BIS was being used across campus already. It was already scaled to help us really stay on top of any issues that may start trends or patterns or cause future disruptions on campus. But what we noticed is that a lot of our faculty members were using that to let us know that a student wasn't attending class, to let us know that a student was missing assignments, that a student wasn't engaged in class. And so slowly, the work of the BIS team was starting to separate into two different routes. One was very behavioral and intervention focused, code of conduct, all the things that the BIS team was created for. And then the other route was really the academic side. And that was when really our heads kind of came together. It was Casey and I, and we were like, how do we separate that from the BIS team, right? The BIS is made of the chief of police. The chief of police probably doesn't really care if the student is, missing class 2 times a week, right? And so how do we create that? And so what we did is we used our SIS system, which is also Banner, and we put together a few different ways to do it. It was a little clunky, but it was technology that worked for us, technology that our faculty members were somewhat already familiar with. It was a little cumbersome because they had to go through each of their roster and click yes, no, put comments for every single student. It wasn't very efficient, but at least it kicked us off for our first year of trying this. And once we realized that yes, our faculty want to provide feedback, most of our faculty, and we also, and I'll let Casey take care of that part, but that we had a mechanism to really gather that information. We actually made an investment as an institution to partner up with EAB. They have a Navigate platform that is really designed for this. They call it progress reports or enrollment checks. But they have a really fascinating way to send these reports to the faculty inboxes, and the faculty have to go in and just check through their roster. They can select any sort of criteria to report back to us, but they can also select if a student's just doing well, if a student, if they want to give a student kudos. So then we get a report of all the students that are missing classes, that have low test scores, everything that you can think of, that is then routed to what is called our student central team. They are what most other campuses would probably call a success coach of some sort, but they also work very heavily as pseudo-academic advisors, I would say. They work alongside our faculty advisors for the academic piece of it. But they are the ones that are receiving these alerts, receiving these cases, and then doing the outreach. And so I would say that I do think that our investment in Navigate has been very helpful for us, but a lot of the work that we did was before this technology piece. A lot of it was the attitude and the care for the students, and the raising of the hand from the faculty members that said, hey, I need to report this, and I'm just going to report it in whatever mechanism that I can find, which was our early alert BIS system, and that really helped us think about how we can scale it at our institution. And as we know, our school is a little bit smaller, it's about 2,000 students, and so we were actually able to roll it out to all of our programs, from undergrad to our doctoral programs.
And just so you also know that if you engage in one of these efforts, you may start out doing something where it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Really, what we started out with was a simple spreadsheet. I got the registrar to help me with a particular report, so it just pulled the data from the grades that were recorded in that initial academic feedback. I pulled the spreadsheet, I could see what was happening, and then we started working collaboratively on our campus to distribute, okay, what are we going to do with these students? And we're going to talk about that shortly, but if you're starting to think about, okay, how might I do this on my campus, you don't have to have a big platform. You can probably do something very simple, and it can be as easy as an Excel spreadsheet to get started if you were not one of the people that raised your hands and thought that you had a piece of technology that would help you do that.
I would also say, as they discovered with Banner, talk to the people on your campus. If this is something interesting, you may have a software that you can mold into something like this. Banner, which I think is ACC Banner, maybe they're people, right?
You already people so.
If your Banner, one of the things, there was midterm grades, but there's also, they had a version of success checks or early alerts in Banner. Again, that's what we started with, is very clunky. I think that might be a bit of our secret to our success, is we had faculty start out with something that was a little clunky, and then we moved to Navigate, and they're like, this is amazing. But I think that, talk to your IT, talk to people, because there may be something that you have that you just don't even realize.
And the other thing too, for us to convince faculty to participate, we had to be very clear about how easy it was using Banner, and we are also a Canvas school for our learning management system, and that kind of feeds into KP's wonderful strategy.
Again, a big part of this is our culture. We've been talking about early alerts for a really long time as we geared up from the BISP perspective, the Behavioral Intervention Team perspective, and so reporting wasn't something completely new, but explaining the why to faculty was extremely important. And I spent a lot of time with campaigns, at faculty meetings, going to individual school and college meetings, where I really talked about not only why is this important, some data to back it up. We had some great data pieces that I could say students determine within the first 2 weeks of class whether they think they're going to like the class or not. And so I hit that from almost an ego standpoint of you got to make it good in the first 2 weeks, right? But some different data points that we were able to show this is really meaningful. The other thing that was really important for them to understand is what we do with the information, because it is some work, right? And so that's where I was able to bring Cindy in and her team and say, well, this is what we do. We have outreach, and this is how we outreach. And sometimes it was hard for faculty because if they put something in, they wouldn't necessarily get an email from a student academic planner that would say, all right, well, I reached out to Johnny, and this is what he said, and so on and so forth. Sometimes that happened if there was a conflict and we needed to bring them in, but we're also talking about a lot of early alerts, so it's not realistic for the academic planner to then turn around and tell everyone. And that's what Navigate brought to the table, is it gives faculty access to see that as well. And so now it becomes this full circle. Yes, ma'am.
What was the phrase that you called it again? I love that phrase. You didn't call it a midterm grade. You called it something else.
Initial academic feedback.
Initial academic
And we
feedback.
call it IAF on our campus.
Okay.
Love
Thank you.
acronyms.
Okay.
And language matters.
Exactly. It matters. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
we have similar lessons that we've learned.
Right.
That is so important. Yeah.
We learned a couple things about language, and one of them was when we have a drop down that says some of the different problems, what exactly do we mean? And we came across some things where faculty thought it meant one thing and we meant it to be something else, and we had to reconcile what that meant. And luckily the faculty were letting us know in those places. I think that helping the faculty to understand and leaning on our university values of caring for people really helped the faculty move forward and say, yes, this is important. I also needed to take the pressure off of faculty because there were spots for you to put in a midterm grade, right? It would ask for that. And another example of why you changed the name, because I would have faculty contact me when it was due and say, look, I just did a quiz and I got to grade all these quizzes before I can come up with their exact grade. And I was like, no. I don't need to know that they have an 89.3. What I need to know is, are you concerned about the success of the student, or are you not? Are you concerned or are you not? And so as we kept repeating this messaging and worked with faculty, I think it took some pressure off of them to go, I don't need this all exactly. I just need to say if I'm concerned. And then now I have a team of people that are helping to reach out to my student. The burden is not all on me. And they do a lot of outreach, don't get me wrong. Faculty are excellent about, hey, why weren't you in class? Hey, what's going on? Hey, I'm worried about this test score. But to know that you have another team that's also reaching out, maybe sometimes getting more of the story, it was really helpful. So understanding the why and taking the pressure off were good points for us.
And along those lines too, one of the lessons that we have learned that is really important for closing the loop, that I think would be important for anyone who wants to do something like this in closing the loop, because keeping that faculty motivation to say, okay, I see why you're asking me to do that, I feel rewarded that I've done this now, I've helped this student or I've done something. If you can figure out some way to let them know that you have acted on the alert, that you've received it and acted on it, even if you don't tell them all the information. So it doesn't have to be complicated, but letting them know that their work didn't go into the ether somewhere, never to be attended to, because as we know, faculty are always being asked to do more things. And so if you let them know, hey, it's easy, it really is super easy for us. All they have to do is click one button. It pulls directly from their grade book out of the system, so they don't have to do much. But that wasn't enough to keep them fed, if you will. They had to know that we were doing something with it. So that was an important lesson that as we prepared for this presentation, we found out that was very, very important for faculty to know.
Is the grading in these classes like universal? Everyone is doing the same rubric of percentages or points or no?
No, and it goes back to that idea, are you concerned about the student or are you not concerned about the student? In University Seminar, they are doing roughly the same thing, yes, so that was helpful, but it's only one data point. So you're going to see why we care about more than one data point in just a little bit. We don't think it matters, that we think it only matters, are you concerned about the student or not? Now, for those in the room who are from higher education institutions, 2-year or 4-year, what you do have to do is have a culture change. A lot of classes on in the higher education landscape, there's a midterm and a final, and you sink or you swim. And we're changing that gradually, but if you've got some old school faculty that's what they do, when you tell them they need to submit a grade, starting right after rosters are certified, which is, like 13th class day, they're like, I don't have any grades then. So you have to start talking with them early so that they actually put something into their syllabus, and we've got some things that we've learned from that as well.
But when we are pulling from Banner, we're pulling an actual letter grade for us right now, currently.
Yeah.
Now, they have an opportunity to tell us exactly if they're concerned about it, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But the IAF specifically is an A, B, C, D, or F.
Yep. And we do not have that. So all of our classes are pretty different right now, that we would not be able to, there's not a single data point that we can pull from our learning management system that would help us in that way. And so that was another reason that we really lean towards, are you concerned, are you not? Now there is opportunity for the faculty member to, if they say that they have a concern, they have to fill out a drop down that has some different options, but it's pre-select. There's an optional comment, a box for comments, and there's an optional box to put in the grade. So if the professor has it and they want to put it in, great. But again, I wanted to take that pressure off. I want to know if you're concerned or not, and then we'll do that rest of that work. And that way we're working together as a team.
So what do we do when we finally get the data? So I oversee many of our academic services units, so our tutoring, our mentoring, our coaching. And at scale, we've got a lot of data points and information now. So we have really taken a tiered approach at how we provide an intervention to students. So if we have grades for all 5 classes that they're taking, and for instance, they're only failing 1 class, we're sending them just a text nudge saying, hey, we know you might be struggling in Bio 1330. Here are would you like information about tutoring services? Click yes for more information, click no, and it's a communication method that we're trying to deliver to them. Now, if they are failing 2 or more, we have much more interventions that we're offering to them. They're actually getting a phone call from our academic advising center saying, hey, we know you're struggling, let's bring you in for a conversation to see, are you in the right major? Are you not utilizing your services or resources? And we're hoping that really gives that personal touch point to a student, right? We have also sent email communications to them, and we do this at different points throughout the semester. So when we talk about early grading for us, we have interventions happening between week 3 and week 4, and we're relying heavily on early faculty having those meaningful assignments early. Then we have another touch point at week 5 and 6, and that is really our midterm grading where we provide our most highly intervention approach. Okay? And then we will do approach right before, a little bit before the drop deadline if a student is actually failing a class and needs to have a drop point. So we use a different type of strategy depending on how many courses a student is struggling in. Yes, ma'am.
What's the typical caseload for those advisors?
She's coughing not because of allergies. It really varies, so we have different centers across campus, but right now at Texas State, we have a single intake first-year advising center, and their caseload is actually fairly manageable. When they're fully staffed, they're just over 1 to 350-ish. Somewhere between 350 to 390, but that's only because we had added some advisors. Now, that's not true across campus. So, if we're, we have high turnover sometimes in those advising positions, so you're probably really looking more at like a 1 to 400, but that's still manageable based on what first-year advisors know that they need to do. So one of the things that we're really making a push on our campus to do, that I would love all the partners in the room that we can get, because this is dialogue that happens very early or could happen very early, is finding that subject that you're really interested in is very, very important. So we're talking about best fit major a lot on our campus with our first year advisors, because if you're not in a major that you're well suited to, then motivation is difficult. Sometimes struggling with the academic preparedness is an issue. And so we know that that conversation needs to happen very early, and a lot of our students being first gen pick majors that sound like high paying jobs, and then they're not in that major that is going to actually be something that is really a good fit for them. So I see lots of smiles on their faces. You all are speaking, we're all speaking the same language. And so that's the reason for the first year advisor interventions for students that are struggling in multiple classes, because we know that that's probably the issue. And we're doing some things to back that up, but for a first year intake center like ours, there's a system that they have to assign, and they've created a new Microsoft form with our IT folks that can assign an alert that comes in based on the category, and then close that loop with the faculty member later that it has been answered. So then we've automated one more part of that process, or we will. That's how it's supposed to work this year. Did that answer your question?
Yes. And the other thing we've done is we've looked at high DFW courses, and we really target those courses on which students are not doing well. And even if it's that one course that they're failing, we also provide a personalized approach to those particular students as well. And then for our students that we know are maybe not going to university seminar class, we send that list to the residence hall directors and have the RAs give a nice little knock and how are you doing? Because we know you're not attending this 1 hour course once a week. So.
Can I ask about the reception that the students meet you with, basically? Like, what are their sentiments on these interactions? Like, is it generally positive or negative, or are you tracking that?
Ooh, that is a fantastic question. And I think it varies, but you go ahead.
Yeah, it does vary. Some students are like, hey, thank you for noticing that I'm not doing well, right? And connecting me to a resource I didn't know existed. We have a lot of resources and services at Texas State, and we need them because we have many students, but they don't know exactly which one to go to for assistance, especially with the high number of first-generation students. The multiple academic services that we have across campus can be very overwhelming for them. So really directing them to one is one approach that has worked. Then we have the students that, do you want more information? Nope. and we know we're going to get that too, but we want to be able to provide as many opportunities to engage with them at their level as we can.
So I love that you asked the question about the interventions, because that is, I'm being vulnerable, that is definitely where we're learning our lessons at Concordia. Just to give you a little bit of insight on what that looks like, last year, because our faculty really took this on and embraced it, we received over 57,000 alerts of all kinds of alerts, right? I am admittedly a rip the Band-Aid off kind of person. And so when we launched this, my staff was all on board, and we were going to do 6 outreaches for every single alert that we get, right? We're so excited, and it didn't work. We tried. I think we got 59,000 attempts at outreach with a bitty little team of 5. And what we learned is that all these mechanisms work, but also it's that first interaction that is the most crucial, because what we found is that sometimes, especially for our first gen students, The professor was marking them as like absent, they were concerned because it was a big test day. We found out that the student had a dentist appointment and they had no idea that they should let the professor know, or that the test, they didn't know how to read the syllabus, or little things that our academic planners were then able to coach them on, right? And that's, I think, the most important part, and the most important positive feedback that we receive from students is that sometimes they just don't know how to navigate, right? They hear about the mental health center, they hear about our academic support center, they hear about tutoring, and we send them that information pretty frequently, I would say, via email, text messages, or whatnot. We do it at orientation, but then when it comes down to it, when they are actually failing a course where they get their first little test score, that phone call or text message from somebody that they know and they've already engaged with goes a long way. And I will tell you that our favorite thing to do, for most of us in that space, is to actually walk students down to the actual center that we're talking about. And that goes a really, really long way for some of our students, and especially our first gen students. We're such a small campus, but we take that for granted, I think. Sometimes we think that we tell a student one thing one time and they are going to remember it, and they don't. And so that has been probably the most beneficial outcome of our interventions, is that we find those little nuggets of information that mean that alert really wasn't, it didn't mean that the student had excessive absences. They didn't know how to communicate to their professor about what was happening with their schedule, or they didn't realize that they had to do an official schedule change in order to change to another section, right? And so little things like that we've uncovered with our intervention efforts. And also the residence hall outreach. We actually just learned this last year. We did the whole RA knock thing. Sometimes they were home, sometimes they weren't. Our residence halls, the students get an alert when they get a package or a mail in the mailing center. So we started sending mail to our students, literally from one point of campus to the other. They would get a text message, and I kid you not, they would immediately come into the office because it was a fancy letter on the letterhead, saying, hey, we need to talk to you about your academics. And they would come running over, even though we had tried 6 times, emailing, text messages, phone calls, all the other things that we could try. And so that was something fun that we learned this last year with our intervention approach, is that sometimes you have to kind of go back to a grassroots effort to try to get in contact with our students.
I'm going to steal that.
I think the other important thing is the partnership with faculty. And when we have the student central office and we have faculty, one, we're saying the same things. We're trying to work together as much as possible, but when a student walks into Student Central and says, well, Dr. Johnston, insert weird thing here, and the person's going, why would she say that? And then going, hold on, I think there's a miscommunication. And it's super easy and super normal for the academic planner to pick up the phone and call Dr. Johnston and say, hey, I've got this student, this is what they're saying, can you help me navigate this? And 9 times out of 10, it's a misunderstanding because there's language that we're using that they're unfamiliar with. There's a perceived person of power that's telling them something and they're inferring something, right? And so it's that partnership that's really helpful as well to navigate through these items.
And before we close, I know there were a couple of other, close on this question, not close the thing, but I do think it matters how you deliver the information, obviously, but I think it is worthwhile to think about what your message is, because I think certain messages are received better than others. And so one of the things that we've seen is that a personal email from someone that they know is much more likely to be acted upon than a general mass email from an email box. And the text nudges, and we work with Trellis a lot to help us with text messages, and many campuses do that, and other campuses have the ability to do that, which we hope we'll have soon. But there are lots of ways to frame a message, and we've spent a lot of time in that. So if folks are interested in some of the messages that we've created, we can't tell you that we've tested them and we know that they work or they don't work, but we're happy to share because students, they will respond to phone calls now too, which, pre-COVID, they wouldn't pick up the phone to save their lives. They will pick up the phone now. And that's really interesting too. So going back to old school seems to resonate a lot with these students.
And really stepping outside like these silos, right? I think one of the most beneficial things that we've done is really disrupt this kind of thing that, only the academic planners can reach out to a student who's failing. We have financial planners as well, and they work strictly with financial aid, paying your bill, all the money stuff, right? And you'd be surprised how close those relationships develop with the student and the financial planner, because they're talking about really intimate family financial details, right? And they, the financial planner team, I can boast about them all day. They create families with these families because of just the intimacy and the information and the trust that's developed in there. It is not unusual for an academic planner to say, hey, I can't reach this student and they are not doing well in class. Do you think you can reach them for us, please? And they will pick up that phone right away as soon as that financial planner calls them. And so I think it's important for us to really start thinking outside of the lines as well, is that if we're really truly caring for students, it doesn't mean that it's just one individual on your campus that cares for students, right? It's across the campus, it's across the university, and it's across levels too. It's not unusual to have vice presidents or provosts, when she has time, but please don't tell your provost that I told you. But, for certain situations, like, it's important that we show care across, up, down, all different ways, and we can do it with these type of interventions as well.
You just gave me a great idea. Our president is very social media heavy. He may record a video, and we may be able to send it out, and they'll watch videos.
Yep.
That's the other big thing too. I want to piggyback on that too. One of the other successes that we feel like we've had is also bringing in faculty in the departments to also take ownership of the students struggling in the class. Great examples, political science has been very involved. They wanted to know exactly which students were struggling, and they have their own team within that to reach out to that student and as well as connect them to the resources within that department specifically. So that's been another person and team that comes together for that conversation as well.
There was another question. I saw a hand. Did we get it?
I was going to ask if you're keeping data on the types of alerts or once they make the phone calls with the students, academic versus non-academic.
Yeah, we do. So we have, because we have a couple different, the Navigate is more heavily academic, the success checks, but there are places where, they might put in a comment that says it's something else. And then the early alerts that we have, that you can submit anytime, we have data that shows what are those about as well. The thing that we have found though is they're so interconnected. So as soon as they're struggling in class, it could, it feels like they're not understanding the content, but actually there's this other thing going on in their life. All sorts of, maybe they're really struggling in class, and so now that's affecting how they're working on this team. Let's put it in early alert, right? And so when we have the data, we see it's completely interconnected a lot.
It's a regular practice during our BIS team meetings, where we get an alert of the students maybe doing something in class that was not appropriate, right? They broke a student code of conduct of some sort. We will bring up the success checks, the data that we saw, and we will go line by line and figure out what else they're doing in their classes, and usually there's a pattern of some sort. Somebody needs to go out and figure out what exactly is the root cause of that. Just like, keynote speakers spoke about, there are so many different things that pop in our head when we think about students not attending class and truancy. The same goes for students in higher ed. That doesn't just magically disappear when they get into college. There are other root causes. This week alone, we had 3 or 4 students that suffered an immediate family member's death in their family. And only one person on campus knew this, and now by the end of this week, their entire professor and student success team is going to know that information, because we expect that it'll impact other areas too.
That's a good segue, I think, into our next. Or maybe it's not that one. We're getting there. We're not there yet, but we'll talk a little bit about it later. We are, because of our scalability of getting to this, we focus a lot on the academic side, but there is, we call ours SBAT, Student Behavioral Assessment Team, that focuses on those non-academic behavioral issues. So there is a team at our university that's working towards that, but we're getting to the point where we're about to communicate a little bit much more efficiently, and we'll talk about that in a bit.
And I would say that there's a common theme here, so we would surmise that if you do this, you're going to also see the same intertwined issues all the time. the political science rep that's on our group talked about that she was having a lot of students talk with her about mental health issues. Anxiety and depression are huge, and again, those don't magically go away when they come to college campus either. And so those are things that I think we will continue to see, and that's one of the reasons when you build this process that we highly recommend you do it as holistically as possible, even if it looks like you're just measuring something like it looks like for us, oh, they're just turning in grades. But there's so much more to that. So those are the kinds of things that we love to hear from you if you have that sort of experience also.
This is some outcomes that we have after we've launched our various different ones. High rate of engagement from faculty. We've been so successful in this that now our Navigate partner has approached us and said, what are you doing? Please come present at our conference because we've had such a high rate of engagement. And I say that the success checks are mandatory, but there's a lot. Part of it is me stalking these faculty 4 times a semester, lots of emails, maybe some phone calls, please do this. But honestly, it hasn't been that much work because our faculty, once you explain the why, once you took that pressure off, close that loop, they're more than happy to, they want their students to be successful. And so as I said at the very beginning of the presentation, for those of you that aren't in the higher ed sector, that's what I want to express, is that the myth that faculty don't care is a myth. And please, help us in changing that, because the faculty care deeply about our students. It has helped us with some predictive behavior modeling. So we're able to look at some demographic data and the behavior data and then predict how students are going to do in the classes or academically, and then be able to take that and apply it to that next class. And so we're able to take that and go, okay, we know that students that fit these boxes oftentimes struggle. We're going to go ahead and send them this information. Trying to get ahead of it, right? Trying to be proactive rather than reactive. And that just-in-time advising that we all strive to go for, where we know the exact moment in which they need to get that text about the tutoring offices, and it's going to be most impactful because it's not at orientation. And so being able to find the right times for that in that predictive behavior modeling. And that goes hand in hand with that more precise communication plans. When we're communicating, what we're communicating, how we're communicating, so it's the most impactful for our students. And all the data that we're pulling helps us really narrow that in.
There are a couple of things I would want to add real quickly about faculty involvement. So we're talking about faculty involvement as if it's just them turning in what we need them to do. Yeah. And that's the first step, is getting them to do that. But what's really interesting is they will drive their own new ways to be involved that we have seen. And so one of the, I think, biggest pieces for us that came out of this, and some of the work was going on side by side already, but I think it's been synergistic and picked up steam. Some of our faculty in our highest failure rate courses, our high DFW courses, for example, in one of our sciences, a couple of our sciences, they have done course redesign as a result of some of this work, because the faculty were frustrated with, why aren't students succeeding in my course? So a couple of different groups have redesigned their courses, and they've implemented something called Week Zero exam, or Exam Zero. So it is kind of just a barometer exam that is designed to let a student know, are you doing okay or are you not doing okay? It doesn't count for the student grade, but we're now being able to act on that Exam Zero, because if Exam Zero, the student is really struggling, that tells you a lot about what you need to do. And that was really very faculty driven. So when they get excited and they feel like they're making a difference, they can come together and do some things in a way that's much more expansive than maybe what you envisioned when you set this system up.
All right, so next steps. And we're really excited because we've learned from Concordia and been very envious for the last few years. But we have purchased EAB Navigate, and we are implementing that this upcoming fall semester. So we're really hoping that that tool allows us to not only scale up, but automate some of what we're hoping can really identify which students are really trending towards academic failure. And so we've already been in a few planning meetings and starting that process too. But we're really excited about this technology that's going to allow us to serve more students and intervene when needed.
Our next steps probably in maybe from the academic side, and I'll let Cindy talk about her side, is again kind of the honing in on what does that faculty involvement look like. So when we launched Navigate last year, we actually launched it 2 summers ago as everyone had access, but we mostly just asked the faculty to do the success checks, which was emailed to them. Then while the staff teams really got into Navigate, figured it out, worked out the kinks, figured out what works, doesn't work, and we're working through that. This year we've launched that the faculty actually have access to look in there too. And so now we'll be able to create this care team around these success checks where if faculty reports in a success check, I think the student needs tutoring, we're sending out a message or a phone call or text message or a knock on the door that says, hey, do you know about our tutoring? And the faculty can double down on that and actually go in and see, did they go to tutoring? And then maybe, in class, say, how'd the tutoring go? Was it helpful, right? And so there's this closed loop that happens. And so that's really our next phase of what are faculty looking at? What do they want to look at? What do they want to see? How do they want to engage with the software?
From my side of the house, it's the proactiveness that we're really trying to strive for. My favorite thing to say is that there are no at-risk students at our institution. They are all at potential. And so the intervention methods that we use with 5 individuals who are doing the outreach and then 59,000 alerts that are coming in, we have to really think strategically about what that looks like and really using the technology to its best ability. We haven't really leveraged Navigate as comprehensively as we wanted to yet, mostly because I had no idea I would have to learn software in order to implement this, and so that is not my area of expertise at all. But that is one of the goals moving forward, is to really, it's this product that has already been built for this purpose. How do we make sure that behavior predictive modeling is being connected with the communication plans, thus also not creating the burden on our staff who already are being burdened with other things, right? They are coming in, students are coming in talking to them about mental health concerns, they're talking to them about personal concerns, and so how can we use technology to make sure that the staff feel supported in their work as well? And so that's where I would say that we're leaning towards, is really being more proactive. We've set the foundation. How do we become a little bit more efficient in using all that data? Because it's a lot of data,
Casey used a word earlier called, she said she was a stalker. I'm a stalker on my campus. So, and what I would say there is pick somebody that is going to be your person, especially for faculty. I know one of the questions was how do you get faculty buy-in. Pick somebody that's visible, known, and respected on your campus to be able to speak that language to the people. So if you don't need faculty buy-in, if you're from an agency that, you're not in the education delivery space, but you're in, one of our partner institutions, organizations, pick whoever it is that speaks the language of what you're trying to do. So that is really important. You need a point person. You need some upper level support typically for this too. You may be like us, and we started just in the sphere that we could control, but we finally got the upper level support that we needed once we started being visible about what we're doing. So reporting on what you're doing, and your visible person that stalks people relentlessly is very important. I have a partner in crime that she stalks with me. So those are the kinds of things that we need to do, is just keep motivating people. And so find your champions, find your people that are respected on campus that can start, and then message about why this is important.
Yeah, that's the lesson I'm learning this year. I did a ton of messaging last year because we launched it, and we did our first set of success checks already, and there was confusion with some faculty, not for many, but for some. And for me, it was, it's uphill I have a small note to say I did not do the same level of messaging. I did not retrain, I did not remind them what it was for, I did not remind them of the why. And for most of our faculty that are, repeat adjuncts or full-time, that's fine, but our faculty pool changes as well. And so you have to redo those messages, and even with our full-time faculty, it's been a summertime, it's been a minute, and I needed to better communicate what I needed from them. And so that was even a lesson I learned. You gotta keep communicating the why, keep communicating all of those pieces.
And using different ways to do so, because
Yeah.
we can't always assume that they're also reading their emails.
That's right.
But going to our dean's area, going to our council chairs, going to the president's cabinet, and doing it in multiple spaces kind of helps move that momentum.
And find advocates. So I've got a couple of faculty advocates that are like, they really get it. They're all about it, and using them to talk to their peers is also really helpful. I think we have a question.
You're touching on what my head is like this, my colleague, and it seems like we talk about resistance. So college, ECC, it's always one of these things where we're having to, this is the betterment for the students. In our area is college high school relations, don't credit for the college high school, we have a midterm advising report structure, encourage them to submit the things, communicate to the advisors and the managers on our team, and it's a hit or miss depending on who's actually doing it. So the culture change, I can understand that part, but what happens when they don't submit their data points? Does anything happen, or strong conversations?
Take a ruler to the hand.
I think that's a really good thing. What happens on your campus?
Yeah, so I think what you were speaking about earlier, having that leveled support, it's one thing if my registrar or someone like that calls, personally calls, but when I, the VP of academics, personally calls your cell phone and says, hey, we really need this, and then I'm having a conversation, I can tell you some of them get very embarrassed and they're like, oh, I'm doing it right now. Some have questions, some of it is, I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, great, let's walk through it. And so I think having that phone call, the personal phone call that calls their cell phone and says, I really need this, what's going on with that?
Right now, there is no punishment for folks who don't do this. In a previous institution where I worked, this is just an expectation.
Yeah,
Nobody
I would
thought
say
twice
that's
about
what we
it.
have it.
Yeah, so we are not at that place on my current campus because it just hasn't been part of the culture. But we're gradually changing that. So I think part of it is finding your champions again and finding those people who can be very visible and really talk eloquently about the value of it. Because most of the people who teach at ACC that I've worked with care deeply about student success. They're just sometimes disconnected. What I think a lot of folks forget if they're not in, if you haven't been living in administrative land, you forget that faculty are not getting the same information and they're not sitting around the same tables that the administrators are. And so you really need someone who almost interprets sometimes between administrative land and faculty land because they're not speaking the same language. And so I think that might be the thing to strategize most about is who can you draw into this work? Who could your champions be? What resistance might you get? And why, and then get back to that root cause thing. Why would they not submit it, especially if you make it super easy for them?
For me, it was also about asking the question. Truly, I'm not coming at it from you're in trouble, but tell me why this was hard. Because there may be some things that, faculty I have this 17 things that I also had to turn in at this time that I just didn't make that connection. And so I'm going, okay, maybe I need to adjust the timeline. Maybe I need to move this a week or two. That would still make sense for success, but also makes it easier for a faculty member to juggle with those things. I teach every semester, and that's very important for me because I need to understand what that feels like. And know that, it's one class, so it's not anywhere near what a faculty member is doing. But it at least gets me in there to go, okay, this is how it feels. This is the message that I got at the time that I got it, and what else was I doing, and how well do I know my students, right? And so that was important to me so that I could feel that and see some of those problems.
The other culture shift that needs to happen is having early and meaningful grade assignments.
Yes.
In whether it's a test or whether it's a written assignment, something that indicates how well a student is doing academically is one of the things that I think we're also working on in tangent with making sure that they enter in those grades. Because if they don't enter in those grades, it's likely because they didn't have an assignment or they didn't have a grade already. So we're trying to get it in from both angles too.
Yeah, that's absolutely the biggest culture shift on at least a four-year campus is faculty are very independent, can do whatever, unless they're teaching in a department that does have if they're teaching first year English, okay, there's some things that are required. But for most faculty, that's not, and many of them never thought about how important it is, especially for first year and or first gen students to go. They were serious when they said I had to study outside of class, because they're not doing it. They're just going to class at those first few weeks and they think they're done. Oh, I've been to class, I can go have fun now. And that's when they get into trouble. So that early, whatever you can do to ingrain that in your culture, that's probably the biggest lesson that we've learned. Lucy?
So, I feel like you guys are all using a lot of the messaging around just like culture change and change management, so whether that's champion, exposure messaging. So I'm curious to know, like, did you all receive like training or professional development in culture change within institutions, or have you guys just kind of like gone through it, learned it firsthand? And because it seems like you guys are able to maybe almost codify what you've learned in your approaches. So just curious to know, like, was that part of, it seems like as you guys leading the work, did you guys receive the support and training to do that at your institution beforehand?
Great question. Question, and as I'm reflecting, as you were thinking about, while working in different roles, I think drawing on my education. So my MBA, we did a lot of that, but even in my doctoral work, I did a lot of organizational change specifically around education. And that happened not just a few years before we did one of these. So I don't know that I recognized that happening at the time, but now that you asked the question, that probably helped that. We have an extremely supportive leadership at Concordia. And so our president and our provost both are very supportive of faculty, I think. They're very supportive of the work we're doing in student success. It is deeply ingrained into our strategic plan. I mentioned our values before, our mission and vision, and I can tell you that most faculty and staff can recite all of those things, and that's the work of our president. And so as we continue to tie back to that, that helps with that change because it gives the why. And so that's a big part of us.
I would probably say two main things. One is we all know higher ed loves reorgs. I know that hit really deep for some of us. And I think something that has been helpful for me is really watching and learning from the leaders throughout not just in higher ed, but in other professional experiences. Learning from them on what to do and what they did well and what they didn't do so well, what I felt was a gap. And really trying to stay in touch with the team. I really, really, really love the team that I work with, and it means that I have to be very much similar to Casey taking a class or teaching a class every semester. I think it's very important that I know who my team is, and we hear about this everywhere, right? That's what leadership is caring for others. But sometimes that action, your team is going to require a different kind of action. And so that is super important for me. And then the second thing is the doctoral work. I'm in the process of getting my doctorate in organizational leadership. So a lot of the stuff that I am implementing are things that I'm learning from an academic lens and really bringing theory into practice. And so, and I know doctoral work is not for everybody, but there are some great books out there, some great researchers out there that are really developing theories for these type of culture changes that are needed.
Well, I was drawing from my doctoral work too. Boland and Deal's book comes to mind, Organizational Frameworks and the Four Lenses was the first thing that popped into my head when you asked that question. But I think it's also drawing from the experiences. We recently received a new president this past year, and I guess it's a little bit over a year, but we've had a lot of reorg. We laugh because I can't post stuff right now, jobs, because they're going to reroute it somewhere else. But it's part of just understanding higher education and being in that space to know that you have to be adaptable to what is happening, and sometimes we've gotten pushed back, but we keep trying. I loved Jennifer when she was talking about how she doesn't give up and she keeps going and going and going, and change can happen very fast, but it can also happen very slowly. And just being persistent about what we know, what's in the literature, what we know could work, and who are really understanding who our students are, right? And keeping that at the center of what we do. And so we come from a very student-centered mindset of we really could impact many first-generation students' lives, many students in general's lives, and keeping that at the core of the mission, and just kind of rolling with the punches.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and I'll kind of wrap this up. I'm probably the most from the School of Hard Knocks here, because I'm a lawyer by training, so I'm a square peg in a round hole in lots of ways. And that's actually probably been of great value to me in lots of ways, but I will say that institutions are institutions of higher ed, and I'm not going to say we're all the same, but we're all the same. Wherever I have been, and I've spent my career in several different places, the same things return. The same issues return. Higher ed landscape has changed a lot, but the organizations themselves operate in a very similar way. They're all kind of the same phylum, kingdom, phylum, whatever. We're all kind of made the same way. And so I've used lessons learned in previous places probably as much as anything else. So you don't have to have a doctoral class, course in your education that necessarily teaches you that. And we hope that today, I know we're at our time, we hope today that we've kind of given you power to go and create this for yourself. And I'm sure that I speak for everybody here when I say that we would happily talk about our experiences with you. So if you want additional information,